Welcome to 2021 in the Magic Morning Wood, which feels suspiciously like December the 10th, 2020. I don't know why. It just reminds me of that day. I don't know why. But here we are in the new year. Ron, Happy New
Year, Clive.
How's it going?
Oh, great. I had a great holiday that hasn't happened yet.
Yes, me too. Whew.
Yeah.
Right.
And in fact, I had such a good holiday that I drank a lot, and now I see double. Sorry, that's it. I'm trying to do a good segue into what we're talking about today.
No, I was stunned is what I was, Ron.
No, yeah, I didn't drink it actually, so I don't drink that. But something has happened to my eyesight, and now I can see two of you, Clive. What's happened? Have you been cloned? No, it's not working.
Do you want to take another run at it?
Help me out here. Come on.
So anyway, if you cast your mind back many episodes before I had a torrid affair with some other co-hosts, and before we went through the joys of Christmas, way back when in the mists of time we were choosing films that were a reaction to the previous film, right?
Right.
With a tenuous link between shows. So my tenuous link to the last film discussed pre-cuckolding and Christmas, Vengeance is Mine. And if you recall, Vengeance is Mine had a what the fuck ending, a very what the fuck ending. So I went as my weak link, what the fuck endings. So again, spoilers. We're going to get into
very big spoilers for this.
Yes, yeah. So again, go away and watch the 2013 Canadian Spanish French co-production Enemy, and then you can come back here and listen to us spoil it. Right. So Enemy. Had you seen this film before, Ron?
No, I had not, but it had been on my radar. I can't remember why, but I do remember hearing something about the movie Enemy and being really interested in it and the idea, and looking it up and saying, like, I really need to watch this movie, and putting it on a list of some kind, and then promptly forgetting about it. So I was quite glad that you suggested it, because I'd been meaning to watch it for a number of years.
Okay, so this is directed by Denis Villeneuve, who, of course, is a very big name now, right? Arrival, Sicario, Blade Runner sequel, Dune is coming up, right?
Right. Yeah.
So he's done quite well for himself. So
he definitely.
So we can say whatever we like about his film.
And he's French Canadian.
Yes.
Canadian.
Yeah.
Denis
Villeneuve, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. They previously worked on the film Prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Released in the exact same year.
Have you seen Prisoners, by the way?
Yeah, and I did watch Prisoners because I was considering doing that as my reaction to Enemy, because it's the same year, same director, same star,
right.
And so I thought it was that may be a very good link movie, and so I watched it. Decided to go with the double instead, but definitely I watched this one. I really enjoyed Prisoners a lot, actually. So have you seen it?
I enjoyed Prisoners. I think I enjoyed about 2/3 of it, and then wasn't too keen on how it turned out in the end. But but always with Denis Villeneuve, I mean, there's no faulting his filmmaking, at least. I mean, even like I'm not as amazingly bowled over by Arrival as some people are, but I mean, as a director, yeah, he knows, he's got the chops, right? He knows what he's doing.
I will say that I haven't seen a Denis Villeneuve movie that I haven't enjoyed.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So
have you seen his earlier? I haven't seen the French language movies he made.
I haven't. No. Yeah,
no, I haven't seen those either. So we're only familiar with his English language output. But from what I understand from people who are fans, I mean, I'm not sure if people consider those earlier French ones like among his best films.
But I can't imagine he just suddenly became a good filmmaker. I'm sure they have to have some merit to them.
Right. So this is a adaptation of the Jose Saramago novel The Double, which might get confusing because later on we're going to be talking about a film called The Double, which is also a book called The Double, but that's not this.
But by Dostoevsky.
That's Dostoevsky's The Double, which I suppose you could argue is in the back of all this we're going to be talking anyway.
Right. And possibly what's the book this was based on? The Double. The Double. By who? Sorry, what was his name?
Jose Saramago.
Saramago. So I mean, it's possible that Saramago was also inspired by the Dostoevsky.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, a very well-read man, and yeah, absolutely. And you can go even further back. I mean, there's like Edgar Allan Poe stories, and there's like Gogol stories and stuff. But I think probably Dostoevsky's The Double is the Ur text, I believe they call it. But anyway, we'll cast that out of our mind for now. This is based on the Jose Saramago novel, which I'm about 2/3 through, actually.
Okay.
My second.
How does it hold up?
Well, it's my second run at the novel. I remember the first time I saw this film, I tried to read the novel, found it slightly infuriating because Jose Saramago famously writes in very long run-on sentences that just go on forever. So I think, I mean, until you're familiar with a good writer, right? Until you know you're in safe hands, I wasn't familiar with his work, so I found it quite hard work. This time I thought I'd power through, and eventually it has clicked with me. Like I've got used to his style a little bit, so I will finish the novel this time.
Was it originally written in Spanish or?
Yes, I think so, yeah. Or actually, I'm not sure where he's from, if he's from.
Is he Spanish or? It's a Spanish sounding name, so I'm just assuming it's in Spanish.
Yeah, hang on, I'll look up this. He's from South America somewhere, but I'm just wondering if he's from Brazil, it's going to be Portuguese, right?
Oh, it could be Portuguese, yeah.
Jose Saramago is
Portuguese. Yes, Portuguese.
But he died in Spain.
Okay.
So I'm not sure which one he wrote in. We still don't know. Anyway, he wrote in one or the other, at least, and it was translated into English.
It wasn't originally in English anyway. So.
No. So, okay. This is
where do you begin with this one?
Right. Okay, let's see if I can do a very, very brief synopsis, and let's give this a go.
Okay.
So there's a teacher called Jake, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and he seems to be a history professor, right? And he's specifically talking about dictatorships and stuff like that. And he seems to have some kind of relationship. I don't know if she's girlfriend, wife. There's a girl he fucks, right? Played by Melanie Law.
Well, she leaves after in the middle of the night, so she's almost certainly a girl. She's more like a fuck friend, or she's kind of a girlfriend, but it seems like just something. It seems like a regular fuck is what it seems like to me.
A fuck buddy.
A fuck buddy, yeah.
Like you and me, Ron.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wait.
Most famous, I suppose, for being in Inglourious Bastards, right? She's the woman who kills Hitler.
Right.
And so they seem to have something going on. One day, a work colleague, seemingly out of the blue, recommends that Jake Gyllenhaal's character rents a video of a film called Where There's a Will, There's a Way, which you referred to.
Well, to be fair, he doesn't jump right into you should watch this movie. It was sort of like hey, do you like movies? He was almost like trying to spark up a conversation because it seems like he's not much of a talker or like a social guy. And so then he was like, well, can you recommend a movie? And he was like, well, I just saw this movie. So it seemed a little more organic rather than you should watch this movie. It was
that's
more.
True. That's true.
So.
Although I suppose that I'm having difficulty with it just because well, we'll get into this because of you're looking for clues in the film the second time you watch it, at least, and also it's such an awkward conversation. It doesn't seem
it does seem a little out of place.
Anyone would normally have, right?
Right.
But anyway, for whatever reason, he goes to a video store and he rents a DVD of he refers to it as a local film as well. Like they don't actually say where this is set, but it's filmed in Toronto, right?
No, it's set in Toronto as well. I think. I got the.
Anyone ever referring to the city by name?
I can't remember offhand why I thought so, but it wasn't just that it was obviously filmed in Toronto, but for some reason I could tell that it was also set in Toronto too.
Oh, really?
I can't remember why. There was at least one reference somewhere that clued me in that it was. So I can't remember why though.
Might have flown over my head, maybe like.
No, I'm pretty sure it was also meant to be Toronto as well.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it's a local film. He specifically says that as well, which is another thing I was again watching this film the second time. You're so primed for looking for clues which might not be there or not. So I wrote all this stuff down, and I'm like, I don't know if it means anything. So and he watches this film, and at first he doesn't notice, but then in the middle of the night he wakes up, and he, hang on, did I kind of, something's just come back to him, right? And he goes back to the living room and he's looking, he fast forwards to the TV, and he finally alights on a scene where in the background, like playing like a bellboy, it's an extra role really, there's an actor who looks exactly like him, right? Identical. Is of course Jake Gyllenhaal as a bellboy. So he's discovered, oh fuck, I have a doppelganger, right? So just to keep it short here, plot center wise, he kind of contrives to try and figure out who this guy is, and through a series of contrivances ends up with a phone number and an address, and he phones him up, and at first he gets in contact with his wife, right, played by Sarah Gadon, and who's pregnant, and she's married to the other Jake Gyllenhaal, who is indeed a bearded actor who's a very different character, right? The history professor Jake Gyllenhaal is kind of scruffy, intense, kind of,
schlubby kind of, it doesn't, Whereas, this guy's more like takes care of himself, is very active and very kind of confident and vain, and more kind of like
blueberries for his smoothies, and So not really any more likable, I would say.
No, just
another kind of version, and so he's kind of, there's a kind of hilariously awkward scene where he's on the phone trying to explain, I've seen all your films and you look just like me. It's just like all garbled, and there's no wonder he hangs up on him. It's like, don't ever phone here again, you fucking weirdo. And he mentions this.
I kept thinking, like, there's such an easier way that you could actually explain why you're contacting this guy. Why you're really making this into a thing it doesn't need to be, right?
But to be fair, the way they do it, it does sometimes when you're watching a film and someone does something cringe-worthy, you're like, no, like this, But in this instance, I felt I had empathy because it just kind of tumbles out, doesn't it? Like,
right. You don't really know how to explain. I can't really explain with this situation, but
So immediately when he mentions this, I mean, again, from the point of view of watching this film for the first time, his pregnant girlfriend, played by Sarah Gadon, seems to go on the defensive really quickly. She's like accusing him of maybe having an affair or something.
Well, you get the impression that probably he has had an affair, and that this is sort of opening an old wound of some kind.
Yeah, and so she's immediately, and again, the first time you're watching this film, you're like, what the fuck is her problem? She, like, you can see how maybe finding out you have a doppelganger in the world would give you the creeps to a certain extent. But she immediately goes to this extremely dark place, right? And she's really fucking terrified of something, and we're not quite sure what. And she kind of goes to his school to see if he's for real, because the actor Jake Gyllenhaal has decided that he doesn't want anything to do with him. And she goes and she kind of speaks to him, but she doesn't say who she is. And she sees the other him, and she comes back and she's really, really upset. And she's talking to her actor boyfriend, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I think you do know what you're. And anyway, for whatever reason, she's really devastated by this reveal, right? And in turn, that's starting to make actor Jake Gyllenhaal more curious, and he decides, okay, fuck it, I will meet my doppelganger. So they kind of decide to meet at like a secure location, I guess.
So rather than meeting in a coffee shop or a restaurant or something, they decided to meet in a hotel room.
Right. Out of town. Yeah. Kind of clandestine meeting, and then they're like, and then as soon as they meet, actor Jake Gyllenhaal has gone from one end of the spectrum of not interested at all to like really fascinated, and he's like, show me your hands, you've got the same scars as me and all this. And he's full on, and then he scares away our original history professor Jake Gyllenhaal. He's like kind of, oh, okay, no, this isn't for me. And obviously there's a lot ins and outs to this, but basically it escalates to the point where actor Jake Gyllenhaal starts getting fascinated by history professor Jake Gyllenhaal, starts stalking him, starts stalking his girlfriend, Mary Laurent, as well, and seems to maybe start to get obsessed with her.
Yeah, he's quite interested in her.
Yeah, and then
on the bus and stuff.
Via a quite nicely done kind of Raging Bull Joe Pesci homage thing, where he's practicing in the mirror going, did you fuck my wife? Did you fuck my wife? Obviously a Raging Bull thing, right? And then, he decides to, whether he actually thinks that history professor Jake Gyllenhaal has fucked his wife or not, he's decided to act the part of jealous husband and say, okay, that means I get to fuck your girlfriend, and then we'll say no more about it, and then I'll,
I got the impression that he didn't actually believe that he had fucked the wife, that he was just sort of using it as leverage as a way to get to fuck her.
Yes.
And he could feel sort of like less guilty about it, or whatever it is, or give a reason to do it. But
because both Melanie Laurent and Sarah again are both very good-looking women, and plus they you can imagine if you fancied Melanie Laurent, you'd probably fancy Sarah.
Yeah, they're quite in this similar kind of spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, you can imagine if you fancied one, you would fancy the other. Right?
You would fancy the other one. Right?
Yeah. So
the type.
Yes. Yeah. So and actor Jake Gyllenhaal ends up taking Melanie Laurent's character out and getting into a hotel room, and they're going to have sex and stuff like that. Meanwhile, Professor Jake Gyllenhaal, I know I'm making this ever so easy to follow, goes and enters actor Jake Gyllenhaal's room and just hangs about for the wife to come home. The wife comes home, Sarah Gadon comes home, and they get into bed together, not to have sex or anything, just to, just go to bed together, just to talk. And you get the feeling that she knows he's an imposter, and she doesn't
care.
Yeah, but kind of doesn't care, or likes this imposter more than
this one better. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the other Jake Gyllenhaal is fucking Mary Laurent, and then she notices, hang on, you've got what's that ring mark on your finger? You're a married, that wasn't there before. Who the fuck are you? And she senses, what's interesting about this, I think the second time watching this, what I noticed was, Melanie Laurent's character is the only one who's actually not aware. I mean, if you take this film at face value that he has discovered his doppelganger, she doesn't know that, right? So when you're watching it the first time, you might think that the penny's dropped and she's like, oh, you're the other guy, right? but actually she's not aware.
She doesn't even realize that there is another guy, right?
So then she's freaking about the ring, but then when they're driving away and they ends up they have a terrible car accident. I don't know if I'm assuming they die. It's a pretty bad smash up, right? They have an argument in the car. The car smashes up, and just before she gets into an argument with him, saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And then the dialogue leads me to believe that she no longer actually thinks he's a different person. She's now decided it is regular Jake Gyllenhaal, but he's fucking with her in some way, right? Like mentally fucking with her. Or she's not quite sure, but she doesn't think he's another person, I don't think. She just thinks he's being weird and an asshole, right? And then boom, the car crash happens. Then we cut back to previously history professor Jake Gyllenhaal, who's now seems to have kind of taken the place of the now dead husband in a way. He's just kind of slipped. They're living together, and just the next day, right? It seems, and you think, oh, okay, that's kind of clever how they've done this. This has been a quite clever, twisty film. I've enjoyed watching it. I see what they've done there. Oh, that's quite good. And then, again, spoiler warning. And then
here's the big spoiler.
Jake and Gyllenhaal's like, because he gets, the other thing is, we should mention, there's this thing we see throughout the film of this weird sex club that one of the Jake Gyllenhaals, at least, we're not quite sure which one, is going to. I think we're supposed to think it's the actor one, right? He's going to some kind of weird sex club where men...
The movie opens like this. This is the first scene of the movie.
Yes. Watch girls frigging themselves off and stepping on large tarantulas, like the squish fetish scene, I guess.
And there's also another scene that's just sprinkled throughout the movie, just randomly, like sort of like a transition shot, which has this gigantic kind of horror movie-ish spider,
right,
like crawling over Toronto, kind of thing, right? So, but it's very kind of like hazy and sort of like you're not sure if it's meant to be like, it's obviously not meant to be like a realistic type thing. It's just
right. Is it literal? Is it a dream? Is it? Yeah.
It's a dream. It's dreamish. Yeah. So it's like a dream kind of.
And we briefly see a woman with a spider's head. So there's a spider.
Yeah, again, a dream. Yeah, she's walking along the ceiling that has a spider's head and stuff. These are all kind of like dream quality type things. Yeah.
But then at the very end of the film, where we see him, where the film's played all its cards, and okay, it's very clever what you've done there. And so he gets the history professor Jake Gyllenhaal, who seems to have switched to the other one, gets this key in the mail, and it's the key to this secret sex clubby thing, we'll let it believe, right? And he's like, quite fancy. He's tempted to go back. And we did meet another character briefly in the film as well, who discusses this with Jake Gyllenhaal, right? He's like, oh fuck that club.
The doorman or whatever, who's the security guard to the building.
It was awesome. I'd love to go back. I need to go back, he says, right? It's like, so there's some awesome shit going on in this weird clandestine sex spider club thing. So the very end of the movie is Jake Gyllenhaal kind of thinking, oh, okay, maybe I'm going to go along to this club. Plus, you think it's if he's the history professor, Jake Gyllenhaal, he's never been to this club before, right? So he's wondering just what the fuck is this key for, and he's curious to go to this because it sounds pretty exciting, right? And then he's like, I might go out tonight, darling, or whatever, darling. And there's like no response from the room, so he goes into the bedroom to see what his wife is up to. She has turned into a giant fucking tarantula that fills the room. Cut to end credits and the Walker Brothers singing. And the first time I saw this ending, I almost stood up and applauded. I was like, at the same time, I didn't fucking understand, like, what the fuck? Just the level of what the fuckness about it. I thought, well done, Phil. Well done. Yes. So that's my not very good attempt at kind of...
that was as clear as mud. Yeah.
That's kind of basically what happened, right?
Yeah.
More or less. So before we go into any interpretations, I'd really like to know what you thought of this film, Ron.
Well, I think I had probably similar to reaction to yours. I don't know if I applauded at the end, but I definitely exclaimed out loud, "What the fuck?" Yeah, definitely. That was exactly how I reacted to the ending. I did, of course. I defy anyone to see that coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If
Yeah,
anyone
yeah,
ever
I mean,
says, if you ever get into a conversation with them,
I knew that was gonna
and they're
happen.
like, you know that anime film? I knew that ending. You're like,
Oh yeah, I knew she was
bullshit.
gonna be a tarantula at the end.
Yeah. It's a good bullshit detector. If anyone ever,
Yeah. Of course, yeah. But of course, it's not something you could see. And it just sort of made me. It had the effect of that happens in only a few movies, and I think we've talked about a couple on this podcast, but it doesn't happen that often where I immediately want to go back and rewatch it. I want to go back and rewatch the movie right away because like, wait a second, I missed something. I don't know what just happened. I must have missed something very important. I had to go back. So I didn't rewatch the whole movie, but I did go back and I kind of like watched certain scenes and I kind of fast forwarded through the movie just to kind of get a feel for like the whole overarching kind of structure of it. And and definitely when you see the spider images earlier in the movie, from the beginning, the very beginning, the sex club, and then the giant one crawling over Toronto, and the other the spider faced woman and walking on the ceiling. They all have this sort of like dreamlike quality where you kind of just sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, I see this is just a thing, but you never really question it when it happens, which is surprising. Like, even though there's a giant spider over Toronto, you never really say, oh my God, it's like Godzilla. It's like he just sort of like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. It's just like a spider imagey dream stuff, right? It's surprisingly, you never really question it until the very end. You're like, wait a second, that was actually really important, I guess, right?
That's a good point, actually. I never thought of it until you mentioned it. But yes, normally if you were watching a film that wasn't about giant spiders and a giant spider was suddenly in it,
you would say, hey, wait a second, what the fuck is this giant spider? But I remember vividly watching that scene and saying like, oh, okay, giant spider, okay. Right. And then never questioning it or saying like, what the fuck was that all about? Like I never even said what the fuck was that about until I got to the end. Wait a second, maybe that was important, right? So and also like the spider faced woman on the ceilings of it. So I mean, it was quite successful in that.
Just before you continue on, I have a question for you because of this specifically for you. Because we've talked about before on the show as well, a slight difference between you and me as viewers when it comes to certain films is, in general, I quite like ambiguity in a film, and I quite like being wrong-footed, and often for you, it's a bit of an Achilles heel, isn't it? When a film is too opaque or it's something that rubs you the wrong way, right? So I was just curious, before we get into like going back and looking over the film, when you saw this film for the first time and you had the what the fuck response, was it a positive what the fuck response, or were you like annoyed by it? Because like I said, I almost stood up and cheered. In your case,
I wouldn't say
was it?
I would say it's actually an Achilles heel for me. Is that I don't mind ambiguity as long as the ambiguity is earned.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So story, I suppose.
Yeah. If it's just sort of like what the fuck is happening, and just for the sake of having an audience not know what the fuck's happening, that I don't really like. But if it's an earned ambiguity, then, if I feel like it's left open and it really got there and it was a payoff, the ambiguity is okay, then of course I don't mind that. And in this case, my knee-jerk reaction would just say, oh, come on, a fucking spider, really? Right? But then I stopped and I was like, wait a second, it actually was a payoff because there was a lead up to it of sorts, right? And so because it wasn't just like a spider out of nowhere, it was there was spider imagery and themes all the way through. So I was like, oh, wait a second. So it's more to do with the fact that maybe I need to watch it again, more to do with the fact that it didn't earn that payoff. As a side note, I mentioned this movie to our friend Mike, who did our theme music.
Mike Powell.
Mike Powell, who does our theme music for the Magic Money Wood. And
Mike.
Hey, Mike, if I don't know, Mike doesn't listen, but anyway, but he I mentioned both this and Prisoners to him because I watched Prisoners as well, and I said, oh, you should check these movies out. I'm curious what you thought of them. And he texted me as he was watching Enemy, saying like, "Oh yeah, oh I like this movie. This is a really good movie." And then he texted me. I could actually literally see when he was watching the ending, where I could actually read the text to you. I will, but basically it came along the lines of like, "This movie's fucking terrible. What the fuck is this movie? They didn't know how to end this movie. They obviously didn't know what to do with the end of this movie, or something along those lines."
Right.
And
So
it
clearly
so it says,
the wrong way.
it says what the fuck, spider end scene. Guess they didn't know how to finish the movie, right? Stuff like that, right? So and so I was like, but it almost, which at first was my sort of knee-jerk reaction, maybe not to say that they didn't know how to end the movie, but definitely, but at the same time, I almost got defensive when he had that reaction, which is sort of like, well, wait a second, it wasn't that they didn't know how to end the movie. And so when I spoke to him about it in person, when we saw him the next time and we talked about it, he was very like, what the fuck was that? You know, like, obviously they didn't know what the fuck they were going to do with the movie. Blah, blah, blah. It was fucking terrible. It was really good up until the ending, blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of like, well, wait a second. I don't know if it's really that clean cut. And I found myself defending the movie. So obviously, surprisingly, I think I liked the movie more than I'd realized.
Right.
And as I was talking to him and giving my interpretations, which we'll get to, I guess, in a little bit, and what happened and what the kind of the research that I kind of did about the movie afterwards and stuff. He at the end, he was sort of like came around. He was like, okay, well, maybe that's true. Maybe, perhaps it's not. It wasn't that bad, right? So it was. He came to an understanding of it as well, right? So
the thing is, it's so well done, just from a technical point of view. So you don't just pull something like that out your back pocket of the when you don't know how to end your film. I mean, it's clearly been leading up to that. I mean, you could argue that in the script writing process, maybe someone didn't know how to bring something to. Not that I think that is the case, but I'm just saying it's at that point it's going to happen. You're not going to.
I mean, I haven't read it, but I mean, you said you haven't gone there yet, but I imagine the book has to end the same way. No, it doesn't.
No, there's no spoilers in the book at all. That's unique to the film.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes.
That's interesting. Okay.
That's something I know because I looked it up.
But does the book have an equally ambiguous ending?
There's no spiders. There's no sex club. I don't know because I haven't got the end yet. I've heard it's got quite a wow ending, but it's not the ending of the film.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's more along my guess is because even though I'm enjoying it more this time, it is a very verbose book. So it's a bit like a kind of shaggy dog Twilight Zone story, like dragged out to novel length. But it's Jose Saramago, so it's quite well written and it goes off on tangents. But the tangents are quite interesting and sometimes quite funny and insightful. But it's just you need a lot of patience to read that book. But no, reading the book's not going to give you more insight into the film. The film is very much its own thing. It just takes the kind of basic concept, the doppelganger thing, and yes, he finds it on a videotape and all of that as an actor, and so just to get this in my mind, so prior to the tarantula, because the tarantula is the big kind of what the fuck.
Yeah.
So prior to that, how were you feeling about the film? Did you think it was because I found it quite absorbing even up to
that. We're talking about just the ending, but yeah, definitely the movie up until that point was quite good, and even Mike was saying the same thing. I thought I was very absorbing. I was really interested in it. I really wanted to know what was happening, or what was it real? Was it this? Was it a really doppelganger? What was happening? Yeah, definitely. I found that it was quite competently done and really absorbing, and quite good. Yeah, I was really enjoying it. Definitely the ending puts a spin on it, kind of thing, right? So you have to kind of reassess your feelings for the whole movie based on how you feel at the end, right? So kind of thing. But definitely, up until the ending, I was very into it. I was really enjoying it.
So I kind of the reason I mentioned that is because I wanted to, because any minute now we're going to get into the interpretations of it, and I'm guessing it's probably led you to the same places on the internet I've been to, right? About
probably, yeah. Mike said the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, but what I just wanted to say was, I think it's interesting it's interesting how, like, certainly I am interested in interpreting the movie, and I've looked and it's kind of interesting and all that. But I have to admit, at the way this film just played out, the first time for me is enough. That's enough to justify it for me. Like the fact that there's this kind of absorbing puzzle box mystery, and then it just throws this curveball at the end that made me applaud. That's actually, for me, that's like, I don't really need it to be interpreted. Like,
yeah.
Even though, like, I mean, we'll get to the interpretation, whether it's valid or not, or whether it's someone kind of retroactively bolting it onto the film, whether you buy it or not. But the thing is, it doesn't matter, because in the same way, like David Lynch's stuff doesn't matter. Like it totally works on a kind of dream logic, or you just think of an idea. This and Enemy, I think, works on that. Like, you don't put it together. It maybe it was deliberately sewn into the logic of the film, but even if it wasn't, I think it works on a kind of level of just, this image just fucking works, right? Like so I suppose the argument would be, did the people who have interpreted it the way they have, which kind of makes sense. I mean, we'll mention it in a minute. It kind of makes sense, the spider thing. But do you think that that's actually deliberate, or do you think it was actually even subconscious of the filmmakers, and then viewers have just interpreted it on behalf of the filmmakers? Or do you think it was deliberately, and maybe at the same time you can say what the interpretation of the film is?
Sorry, you lost me on that question.
I mean, so okay, well, let's put it this way then. So what's the big kind of internet fan-based interpretation of these spiders? Ron, take it away. The way you...
Of the spiders? Well, yeah. Well, I found several different ones, but I guess the common theme tended to be that they were the same person. That it, or at least could be different from what you saw. I mean, I kept to see that history teacher and actor was actually not a doppelganger, that it was actually the same person.
Right. But what I mean is, I think that's
and that spider, the
mysteries in a way, isn't it? And then
what's that?
What I mean is that the doppelganger thing is, all right.
Let me just finish my thought. Okay. So basically what I got the impression was that most of what I saw in my research and what I kind of got, what made the most sense, was that the spiders is sort of a metaphor or a symbol for the Jake Gyllenhaal's character's idea of women, or image of women. Right. So, and sort of how he sort of views and sees women, right? Sort of in that way. So so the first one being the strippers, or the sex club, the prostitutes or strippers or whatever they were, and their reaction, they're kind of dancing or performing with spiders and stepping on spiders. And then another woman in the sex club having a spider face, walking on the ceiling, and then to the wife at the end turning into a spider, right? So all of those things. So it's something to do with, it's a symbol of woman to this character, or these characters, depending on which one you think, right? So
right, and he feels trapped, and the fact that he's always talking about fascism in his lectures, and he also specifically says how it repeats, right? How history repeats itself,
repeating itself.
The first time it's a tragedy, the second time it's a farce, and he has that kind of look on his face at the end, which is not the look you'd expect from a man looking at a giant spider. It's more like a
So I think that's also important, is that he's not afraid of the spider, but it's more like a resignation, or like a disappointment or something, right?
So yes, you did read the same stuff that I read. And I read I saw one particular YouTube video, and it was like, it got my back up a little bit, just because it's not that I necessarily think that this is bullshit. It's not that. In fact, I can see how it might be the truth. It's quite valid. But the person delivering the YouTube video was so certain, and in a way that was like, he's like, there's several interpretations of this which are wrong, and this is the correct one. And I was just like, why are you in such a, why does it bother you so much that you have to, totally get this thing? So for me, it's split into two enigmas, right? So the doppelganger bit, which is for me the least problematic, and then the spider thing, which is, that's the one which is more ambiguous. So I think the doppelganger thing is, as I was watching the film, I almost thought it's neither here nor there whether there is two of them, or whether they're the same person, or whether it's all in his mind. Or I don't think, because all those bits can fit together in a number of different ways, right? It's not like a jigsaw puzzle that only works one way. You can interpret it however you want, especially if you're thinking in someone's head. But the spider thing was a bit more specifically, I was interested where that came from. And so my question to you was, and I don't know the answer to this myself, is, so this interpretation of the spider thing as specifically being some kind of metaphor for being both frightened of and wanting to control femininity and motherhood and feeling trapped and all that. Do you think that was deliberate on the screenwriter Xavier Houlon and Denis Villeneuve? Do you think they deliberately wanted us to read it that way when they were making the film? Or do you think they just came up with this imagery subconsciously, and then they put it in the film because they thought it works on a dream logic level, and then other people have interpreted all this stuff retroactively? Or do you think it's meant to be read that way? Do you think the person has actually cracked the code, or do you think they're just retroactively reading a code into it that isn't there? What do you think?
I think there is a code.
Right.
I think that none of this was accidental or just sort of retroactive. I think that the two of them put the spider imagery in there on purpose. And I actually read, I don't know if you read the trivia, that all of the actors were required to sign NDAs about the meaning of spiders in the movie. So apparently, I think there is a very important, big meaning of the spiders in the movie. That the producers and the director knew exactly what it is, but that they want it to be specifically ambiguous and open to interpretation. And whether or not that is the correct interpretation, it remains to be seen, right? So, but I think definitely there is an interpretation that is correct, but that they didn't care if people got it or not. I think they just wanted,
So my next question is, what do you think about that interpretation, the femininity one? Does that work for you?
It did work for me. It rings true relatively. When I thought about it in that situation after seeing it, about the representation of femininity, and going back and seeing how and when it's used throughout the movie, it seemed to fit. It seemed to work, generally speaking. It may have been a bit of a stretch in general, but I mean, most of the interpretations that I came to sort of accept or agree with, I mean, even those can be stretched to say, well, but what about this, right? But I think it's as possible interpretation as any other. I think.
Yes, what I mean is that I'm not. This thing about this person who's so insistent, that what annoys me about that is just because it works, but it works in the same way as a conspiracy theorist goes back and cherry picks the bits that fit their.
So you're talking about this guy specifically. Is it this YouTube guy was saying there was femininity? That's what he said?
Yeah, well, it's not just him.
Okay, I didn't see this.
A bunch of people, right? But what I mean is, I can imagine, I mean, I don't know I haven't given it the thought, because like I said, I don't actually care, because it works for me just as it is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But I could imagine someone else kind of coming up with another theory and pointing out, and that making just as much sense, right?
Like, I that's what I say. I think that there are any number of theories that you can make about this, and that's just as just as valid as any other ones. But it doesn't make it. I don't agree that it's the only interpretation.
No.
But I agree, it is valid. But I also agree. I also think that there is one correct interpretation that they had originally intended.
Okay.
And whether that is it or not, I don't know.
I think for me, it's more that as soon as I started looking into it, I almost immediately lost interest. I think I prefer the film Enigmatic.
Right.
I don't really want to know.
I think that's why they had the NDAs and all that stuff, because I think they don't want people to know what the interpretation is, the correct one or the one that they thought of, because I think that's the thing, is that ruins it.
Yes,
to know that, oh, this means this.
Yeah.
It's better to leave it open.
Yes.
It's definitely to leave it vague.
Yeah.
And once you are, and sure, everyone can say, oh, this is the right, or this is the right one, then that's good for you, but that doesn't make it true. And the producers don't want you to think that too, because they want it to be open, right? So,
it's reductive, isn't it? It's reductive.
Yes.
So that's what I mean. That's why I got annoyed by this specific person who was so insistent. It was almost like I don't know. They were so pleased with themselves that they'd cracked the code.
Well, good for them. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. No, it was weird. It's like, can't you just appreciate it for what it is, kind of thing? It's just like
right. Yeah. No, they can't. Some people, as you said about me, it's the Achilles heel for vagueness. In this case, it wasn't an Achilles heel for this movie, but for some people it is. And you could see from the reviews in this movie as well, a lot of people just thought, like, what was that nonsense? Even like Mike's reaction, like, that's just fucking nonsense, right? The people just think it's just it's the problem. The only problem with the ending being such a like an out of the blue what the fuck ending is that it can tend to devalidate, invalidate. Sorry, that's right. Yeah, invalidate. I'm sorry. Invalidate the entire movie that came before, right? So for some people,
right.
So some people think that, oh, well, that's the end of the movie, therefore the whole movie was shit.
Right. Or why did I invest time in trying to figure out? Yeah.
So people are uncomfortable with vagueness, and once they have the ending of the movie, and they're like, oh, well, I will never have this clarified satisfactorily for myself, so therefore the whole movie must be shit, right?
Which is weird.
They were really enjoying it,
just because, in a way, it's even better because it perpetuates the mystery. You can go and think about it forever, right? It's like,
of course, and definitely it's a movie that stays with you. Like you're thinking about this movie for days after you finish it, right? So whether you like it or not, right? So
and I again, this is my second time watching it, and again, it's still with. For me, it's actually it's Denis Villeneuve's best film to date.
Oh yeah,
like I said, I quite liked Sicario, but again, I didn't think it was as amazing. Arrival, I quite liked. I didn't, but this one really got under my skin. So this is my Denis Villeneuve kind of masterpiece for the time being.
Right.
But good. I'm glad, because I wasn't quite sure what you would, just knowing that sometimes you don't like a lack of variety. But I felt, my gut told me that you'd probably go with this one because it, like you said, it earns it, right? It's like
it earns it, yeah.
It makes it part of it's not it doesn't detract from it. It adds to it rather than
yeah. I think if it had like a real definite, like, this is actually what's happening in this movie, like, this is this, and if it had like a too clear explanation, I think that would invalidate the movie. I think it would feel like, oh, okay, that's just that's what I was about. I feel like you can't have a definite, this is what's happening in this movie, or else you feel a little bit like, oh, well, it would just be, okay, that's the movie and that's finished.
Yeah.
The only reason that people think about movie and talk about the movie is because it's left open. Like
yes,
that, right?
I think if it was tied up with a ribbon, then even if it was done well, you'd think, that was a good,
okay,
another good Denis Villeneuve film, and then you wouldn't think about it, right?
Then you'd forget about it forever, right? So but I think the fact that this movie is still, has people talking about it, is because of that, right? So
but like you said, not in a because the other way you can go with that, oh, well, that's just a calculated, cynical way of getting people. No. I think it came from a genuine place. I don't think it's a gimmick.
No, yeah, that's the thing. Is that there's the tendency of things like this, and for people who didn't like it to think that it was just a gimmick, and that it was just that they did that just to have people be like surprised and talking about it. But I don't think so. I think it was very calculated. I think they knew exactly what they were doing the whole time. It wasn't just a random image. They definitely knew exactly why they put it there, but it's just not entirely clear to everybody what that reason is, right? So,
but I would go one step further again, even, and say, even if it wasn't calculated, at least at the script writing level, even if it did come straight out of the id and doesn't have a definite meaning, it's still not a gimmick. It works on that level as well.
Still works. Yeah.
So there we go. We've talked around Enemy, and we haven't really got any closer to the core. We don't actually want to, but I think we are both very impressed by this film, I think, Ron.
But I mean, talk about the doppelganger mystery a little bit. Did you have any weigh in on that at all?
Well, like I said, I wasn't really concerned with it, but just for the sake of having this conversation, I did kind of, while I was doing the washing up, I was mulling it over in my head, and I was trying to figure it in different ways, like, are they the same person pre and post accident or stuff like that? And it doesn't quite. There's always one thing that doesn't
fit. Yeah.
Which again, I think is all quite deliberate as well, right? Like I said, it, like when I say it all takes place in someone's head, I don't mean of it in the way that, like, for instance, Fight Club fits together neatly, right? I mean, it doesn't really. It's quite a ridiculous story if you think about it. There's no way you're doing all that by waking up 2 hours early or whatever the fuck. But it's meant to fit together neatly.
Right.
I think this one is designed to always not quite fit.
Yeah. There's always one piece that doesn't quite fit.
It's not a parallel universe. Isabella Rossellini isn't both mother. It's always slipping away from you. And I think that's exactly as it should be. So that's what I thought about the doppelganger stuff.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's even designed to, it's just shadowy enough. It's just out of grasp all the time. Right? How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I felt pretty confident at one point that there was just the same person, that it was like Fight Club-y in that case, that it was just two aspects of the personality, like the Isabella Rossellini with her as the mother saying like, oh, well, you like blueberries, but the other person, one liked it, one didn't, and you should give up this sort of like hobby of acting and stuff like that, so like, oh, well, wait a second, which one is he talking to? And it's very infuriating that the scene just cuts off and he doesn't actually follow up with any questions or but of course that's on purpose, right? So
I think so. Because if you think about if they really wanted to construct it like a mystery, the doppelganger stuff that you solved, it wouldn't be that tricky to like. Yeah, it's not that complex to put together if that's what they were trying to do, which is what makes me think I don't think there is a conclusive. It's more like again when he's talking about the fascistic kind of he's talking about fascist governments and control. He could almost be talking about viewer demanding control over the movie, right? Like and it's secular and it becomes a farce, and it's like the more you think about it, the more ridiculous it gets, the more you're never gonna figure it out. I think that might deliberately be part of the construct, right?
Well, definitely, because when I watched it the first time, his lecture is sort of, he was just droning on about something, and you almost kind of tune it out a little bit what he's talking about. Like you're just kind of like, oh, he's just doing his history lecture or whatever.
Well, he does it on autopilot as well, right? He does
he does the exact same lecture as again later in the movie, exactly like word for word. And then but then when you finish the movie and you're like, wait a second, I got to go back and watch this. I went back and I watched those scenes again. And it seemed, I can't quite get a grasp on it, but there's definitely, what he was saying was definitely super, super, super relevant for the whole movie. Like it was definitely setting up and foreshadowing what was happening, and definitely symbolic and and all that stuff to do with what the themes of the movie and stuff like that. So, but it didn't didn't occur to you the first time you're watching it, right? So
yeah, or even you can imagine it being set up as like seeming to be symbolic and important, but you're just chasing your own tail. Do you know what I mean? It could be,
right.
It could almost add up, but not quite, and that's the clever. It's funny. I enjoyed this film both times I watched it. The more I've been talking about it, the more I like it. I really like this film.
And then like, but see the thing with like when I was like, okay, I think definitely for sure that's the same person. But the one thing that just doesn't track is the wife visiting him at the university,
right?
Which is that, well, why would she go to university and see a doppelganger and have him not recognize her if it was the same guy, right? So that piece doesn't fit, right? So,
but it only just doesn't fit, and
just a little bit,
It's only just So it's
So
smart writing, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's quite well done, I thought, in general, and definitely keeps people talking and guessing, right? So, which is the idea. So,
plus, even if we're totally wrong, and one day Denis Villeneuve reveals in an interview, I don't know what the fuck we're doing. We're just it still works.
Was that your French Canadian accent?
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Okay. Boy.
Scientific studies, they always reveal we are best of buddies. He knows just how I feel. Argument disappears, and we always agree. I'm the same as he is, and he's the same as me. Me and my clone, we're never alone. Me and my clone, we're always at home. Me and my clone, artificially grown. Me and my clone, we're as evolved as you get, with the cream of the genes, with the cutest test tube duplets that you've ever seen. Nobody's yet seen us. They'd say we're a crime, but our father is a genius, way ahead of his time. Me and my clone, we're never alone. Me and my clone, we're always at home. Me and my clone, artificially grown. Me and my clone, me and my clone are very happy. It's not that we hate you. We love each other very much. There's just no one else we can relate to. With our special form of telepathy, we've always managed to stay in touch. I bet that you have wondered if we'll have kids someday. Well, there's another 1,500 of us on the way. And this is just the beginning. In the future I see a world of men and women, all exactly like me and my clone. 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 We're never alone. Me and my clone. We're always at home. Me and my clone. Artificially grown. Me and my clone. In the duplicate zone. Me and my clone. We're genetically home. Me and my clone. Great muscular tone. Me and my clone. Internationally known. Me and my clone.
Okay, so I feel as if we could just go round and round and round. So let's break.
Yeah, go on and on and on.
So what was your reaction to Enemy, Ron? And why did you?
So this one, I have to be honest, I had a lot of anxiety over choosing a reaction to this movie because because I felt like this movie was it was almost like a test for me. It was like it was almost like you were testing me. It's like, okay, well, here's a movie and you have to choose a reaction to this movie. Let's see if you understood it well enough to get the correct reaction. And I was like, oh, but if I could choose this one, or I could choose this one, or but maybe that's the wrong interpretation. Maybe if I interpret it this way, then I should choose this one. But then
you were either over crediting my intelligence or just paranoid.
Yeah. Well, because I was sure that you were just doing it to see if it was almost like a testing me, like, oh, well, let's see if he gets a correct interpretation of this movie. So that's why I was originally going to go for Prisoners, which was because thematically has nothing to do with it, but at least it just had the same actor and director and year kind of thing, right? So I thought that would just click. But then I was like, oh well. In fact, and then I was like, okay, well, I could also go with Spiders, or I could go with Doubles, or I could go with, it had a very Lynch feel. I could just go with something, like another David Lynch, a David Lynch movie or something, because it had very
like a Lost Highway, for example, has that double.
I was thinking as I was watching, it was very Lost Highway, or Mulholland Drive a little bit too. I thought I had a little bit with that one, or Eraserhead. But instead I decided, and then I did some research on it, and it said that in the same year, another movie came out, which was also about a double. It was a movie that I sort of also heard about and was interested in watching, and it seemed to kind of fit thematically. And I think it is quite a closely related movie to this movie. I thought it definitely paired well with it. So
right. Well, like I said, it is ostensibly an adaptation of the Dostoevsky novel, The Double, right? Which, like we said, is kind of in the back of all this.
Yeah, probably what the Enemy novel was. Oh, actually, before we go on to this one, I have one more question for you about Enemy.
Okay.
Why do you think it's called Enemy?
I don't care.
Okay. Yeah, that was just the other thing. I was like, why do you think? Because even right down to the title. The title is also a bit of an enigma, a bit of a mystery. Like, I wasn't sure because, like, what is the enemy? Like, what is it talking about? Like, are they enemies of each other, or is the spider the enemy, or are they?
I guess anytime you get into a doppelganger narrative, you're your own worst enemy in a way, right? You're like your mirror image. You can't exist on the same plane, or it just it's difficult. I mean, the other thing we didn't talk about really is and because it's a larger conversation, but it's an interesting thing. At first, if someone said to you, there's a guy who looks just like me, and but then if you really thought about it, if you sat down to watch a film and you're there looking right back at you, that's pretty I mean, you wouldn't just be able to put that out your head. You wouldn't just go, oh yeah, someone else looks like me. There's probably lots of people look like me.
You'd be like, holy fuck, who is this guy?
That would happen to you. You'd wake up in the middle of the night and go and have a look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's one of those concepts, and there's a lot of books and novels and films about it. And it's one of those, I've always liked the doppelganger motif because it's so quietly, because it's not automatically, it's not like a monster, it's not like a giant bug, or it's like something quietly creepy that kind of creeps up on you. The more you think about it, it's like it gives you the shitters, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, I was just. So this movie was also 2013 movie called The Double, again based on the Dostoevsky novel.
Have you read The Double, Ron? The Dostoevsky?
I haven't. No, I've always been interested in Dostoevsky, and I've made a couple attempts in the past to read Brothers Karamazov, which I've always failed. So, but it's definitely, every time I see or watch anything to do with Dostoevsky, it inspires me to read it again, but then I never get around to it. So, but I definitely would like to read The Double, and it inspired me to. I'm also interested to read Enemy as well. I don't know if you recommend it or not, but
I can even lend you. The good thing about the Dostoevsky The Double is it's a good entry point as well, because it's a fairly slim volume. So
Oh, is it? Okay.
it's not like The Idiot or Brothers Karamazov. It's not like a doorstopper of a book.
Right. Right.
And actually, for me as well, the most of Dostoevsky I have read tends to be his apart from Crime and Punishment. A lot of the other ones I've read tend to be his short stories or novellas, and it's a good way into him because there's a lot of good stuff. Yeah.
I should try that. So, but yeah. Anyway, this one, the double, directed by Richard Ayoade. Ayoade. And written by Richard Ayoade and Avi Corrine.
Harmony Korine's brother.
Huh?
Harmony Korine's brother.
Who's Harmony Korine?
He made like Gummo and Spring Breakers, and you're not familiar with he was like back in the day he was he wrote Kids. You remember Kids?
Okay, I didn't see it, but yeah. So.
Okay, and he was like back in the day when Chloe Savini was the it girl. They were like a couple and dating, and he's part of that whole 90s indie cool kid, Vincent Gallo, Harmony Korine, Chloe Savini thing. So his brother, and he was the associate producer on this. Yeah. So
and also Richard Ayoade is also like it was from the IT crowd. Is that right? Yeah. So he's a comedian, a comic actor as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. So I haven't seen the IT crowd, but I
was wondering if you, because
it's been on my list of to watches, but I haven't gotten around to it. But so he's mostly famous as an actor first, right?
Well, he's mostly specifically as a comic. I'm just trying to think if he's ever done. I don't know if he does stand up, but he's certainly someone who he's famous for being funny. Like he's on TV panel shows as well. Like he has a certain very arch kind of persona. And yes, he's most famous for being on the IT crowd as well. Character slightly different from his arch persona, but yeah, now he seems to have reinvented himself as a film director, right? But
film director, right? Yeah. So anyway, and starring Jesse Eisenberg as the doubles, and Mia Wasikowska. Am I pronouncing that right?
Wasikowska, I think.
Wasikowska. Yeah. And Wallace Shawn and Noah Taylor. Yeah, my favorite. I love Wallace Shawn. Noah Taylor.
This is something that struck me while watching this about Wallace Shawn. An interesting enigma about Wallace Shawn, right, is this for me, is Wallace Shawn in movies is always exactly the fucking same, right? Like he's always Wallace Shawn. However, what I know
he's always Wallace Shawn. Yeah.
But what I know about Wallace Shawn, other than the films I've seen him on, he's a really big theater name, isn't he? Like he's considered.
Yeah, he's quite a famous playwright as well. Playwright and stuff.
So I'm just guessing. I mean, in the theater as an actor, then obviously a playwright is a different thing. Is he like? If you were familiar with his stage work, would he have more range than he seems to have in film? Because I love seeing him in film as well. But if you didn't know all the other theatre background stuff, you'd just assume, oh, it's that guy doing his shtick kind of.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen him as anything else, but
isn't it an odd? Because it's usually either one or the other. Like someone's a great dramatic actor, or they do this one thing. But it seems like in one instance, in one art form, he has this, and then in another art form, he has the whole other thing going on. So I always find it
unless in this, for example, in this movie case, Richard Ayoade is probably a big Princess Bride fan, and he probably cast Wallace Shawn specifically to play that character, or maybe he was asked. It may not necessarily be that Wallace Shawn doesn't have a range, but that he's cast specifically because he does that character, which is what I think what is desired, right?
That's what's kind of interesting about it, because I'm pretty sure, even though I haven't been to see him, I'm pretty sure he is a man with a lot of range and understands theatre and acting and theatrical dynamics. I'm sure he's very well versed in all that. It's just interesting that whenever they put him in a film, he plays the Princess Bride guy, right?
Yeah. But I think it's probably he was famous for that, and people like, so I want that I want a Wallace Shawn character, and like, oh, well, let's just get Wallace Shawn to do that thing again, right? So,
Right,
so
right.
he probably is like, okay, fine, I can do the same thing again. Right?
But yeah, no, that always fascinates me. Just because I know of that other side of him, it's just interesting that maybe I've been watching the wrong films. Maybe he does do it in some films, but I've never seen him being other than Wallace Shawn.
Right, exactly, yeah. So, but anyway, so basically, same, very not the same story in this one, but the basic summary of this one is that again, kind of a loser, shy, kind of nebbish, kind of worker.
Basically,
Who
Jesse
is
Eisenberg.
something in fine.
Good.
Yeah, yeah, they were playing himself.
Good casting, right? Good casting, I think.
Yeah, playing. It's kind of like something in. I don't even know what his job was. Some sort of something kind of businessy, financial, something or other.
Well, I think he works in a place. I mean, even though it's a Dostoevsky adaptation, I mean, there's a lot of Kafka in here.
Yeah, it's very. Watching the movie, it felt very Kafka and Kafka mixed with Terry Gilliam.
Brazil is in it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very Brazil.
Yeah.
Kind of like Brazil, 12 Monkeys, kind of.
Right.
It definitely had those two elements, kind of.
Yeah.
And it was everything was very drab and brown and sort of bleak.
Yeah.
Kind of like it's just sort of like this.
The Brazil 12 Monkeys thing is very Kafka as well, right?
Very Kafka, right? Yeah, it's
yeah.
very Kafka. But not just the atmosphere of Kafka, but also like the aesthetic, the visual aesthetic, just sort of has had a Terry Gilliam feel, which is
and the kind of idea of a kind of bureaucracy that is not only out of control but doesn't even work properly. The elevators don't work, and then if you kick the elevator to work, then you suddenly get
right.
It's very much that kind of. You're always to blame, right? Especially if you're the main character. Everyone else seems to with it, but you're the center of the universe where you're put upon. The world is putting upon you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, so it's like he's been working at this kind of dead end, kind of shitty job and he kind of worships the copy girl from afar who also lives across the courtyard from him, and he kind of watches her with binoculars, telescope, which is a little bit kind of weird. And then but he's too shy, too nervous of a guy to ever say anything to her, to make himself known. And then
once upon a time, this was a movie trope that was more acceptable than it is today. Like the creepy voyeur from afar used to be kind of considered, a little bit cute. And at least I think maybe not always for women. I think women probably always thought this was a bit creepy. But I think for audiences, we kind of identified. Right. It's only in recent years that we've started to twig how deeply creepy behavior.
Right. Watching people around. So, but yeah, definitely he is meant, but he's not meant to be creepy. I think it's meant to be sort of sweet. Because
it's a bit of a throwback in that way, isn't it?
Yeah. So and she like makes these sort of random sketches or drawings or like ink paintings or something, whatever, that she kind of throws up, and then she rips them up and throws them in the garbage, and he runs over to her building and scrapes the pieces out of the garbage chute and kind of puts them together and has like a scrapbook, and so he's meant to be like sweetly admiring her from afar, and it's supposed to be that's the idea, right? So writing poetry about her and that kind of stuff, but yeah, anyway, but he so he goes on this sort of dead-end job he's had for several years, and then randomly one day his exact doppelganger shows up and starts working for the same company, but this person is a lot more charismatic and kind of a go-getter and kind of aggressive and talk and make and win friends and influence people kind of guy, right? And wins, gets the ladies, and sort of and the woman of his affection, it sort of begins to like this new guy because of his personality as well, and starts to but then he's sort of like is fooling around on her and sort of he's a bit of a player and playboy and stuff, and and he gets wins the favor of the boss and starts to move up in the company and get all this kind of stuff like that, and all the stuff that this guy has always wanted, but doesn't have the personality or the outgoing nature, the extrovert nature to be able to accomplish.
Right, and he gets close to the Colonel, as played by James Fox, who's like the guy who runs the company.
Right. Yeah, he's like the the unseen kind of voice of the the president of the company, whatever. And there's other like real kind of like strange kind of like images where there's like a guy who jumps off of the building across the courtyard and stuff.
And again, very Brazil, right? That scene.
Brazil,
it's interesting. The more it's interesting to hear you explain this, because it's gone from clarity to it goes into a bit of a quagmire, right? And I think that's kind of the fault of the film. I feel you struggling to reach a conclusion, and I don't think that's your fault. I think that's what happens in the film, right?
Yeah. Well, it's I mean, in short, it's basically it reaches a more of like a kind of like a climax where the nice Jesse Eisenberg wants to kind of take down the less nice Jesse Eisenberg. I don't know how to differentiate. At least with Jake Gyllenhaal, they have different jobs. I don't know how to differentiate these two.
Right. They even have the same suits and haircut.
Introvert versus extrovert, I guess. Yeah, right. The introvert tries to take the extrovert down, and and then there's like I don't know. There's help me out here. I think I'm losing the end.
Well, no, I agree with you, because what happens is, I think in the final act of the film is he seems to try and in some way he has to kill himself to get rid of the doppelganger, right?
Yeah. So I mean, and it seems it comes out to be pretty obvious, I guess, by the end that it is the same person, that he hurts himself and that he's chained up the extrovert to like he's handcuffed to him in bed, and he hurts himself, but then the extrovert is getting the same wound and stuff. So I thought that was pretty, at least more obvious than the Jake Gyllenhaal, that it was meant to be two halves of the same personality, right? So
this is a very different beast from Enemy, right? This is this is a mess, isn't it? This film, I think.
It got a little bit messier by the end, and definitely like I don't know how close it was to the. Have you read this book, the Double?
Yes, I have read the Double, not for a long time though. But I think the book ends on a. If I remember correctly, and thinking of Dostoevsky in general, I think it goes to a more ambiguous existential place than trying to tie it up like it does.
Right.
Yeah. Not that it even does a good job of tying it up that well either, right? But it's this film. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Richard Ayoade, I know him from the IT Crowd, where he's very, very funny on the IT Crowd, and I love the IT Crowd. And but Richard Ayoade is kind of not necessarily his real persona, but the persona he brings to chat shows and panel shows and stuff like that. He has this very arch ironic sense of humor, which is.
Can you just for us non-Brits, can you define what you mean by arch?
Well, that kind of very knowing, kind of delivering something in a very ironic way, like when you'd put
like
on
a
kind of air
superior, like
not
superiority.
When you're saying something very serious, like earnestly, but on the inside you're laughing at what you're saying, like a kind of cool nerd kind of thing.
I see. Okay.
And it's sometimes funny, but for me it also sometimes comes across as very smug, something very smug about it.
Superior kind of.
Not superior exactly, but just kind of like too tongue-in-cheek, like too in on the joke, like without they never crack they never crack the wink at the audience that I know I'm kind of being ironically funny now.
Right.
But at the same time, you're fully aware that they are fully aware of it. So it's kind of difficult to. I'm trying to think if there's another example of someone like. Oh, actually, I will give you a good example of. So Richard Oyadi's first film he made prior to this was a film called Submarine, and Submarine was again not bad, probably a bit better than The Double overall, but very, very, very much in the shadow of what's his name's films. The guy who made Grand Hotel Budapest and
I forget his name.
Steve Dessous and
Uh,
his name's gone right out of my head, which is quite annoying because that's that's what I'm talking about.
you mean Wes Anderson?
Thank you, Wes Anderson. There we go. So his first film was very much in the shadow of Wes Anderson. I think.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? That like Wes Anderson has it as well. A very kind of deadpan sort of face it gives the audience, but you get the feeling as if they are fully aware of how arch and ironic and how clever it is, and it seems a little bit smarmy.
I see.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So his first film was very much a Wes Anderson flavored kind of concoction.
Okay.
And this isn't quite that, but in the same way, it feels like, oddly enough, this film seemed like it was out of the 90s as well. Like, it would have made so much more sense 25 years ago, this film. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It felt very indly-pindly 90s cinema rather than something from 2013.
Right.
Sorry, I can't remember what your original question was now. I kind of got lost in a train of thought.
Arch. What is arch? Yeah.
All right. I still probably didn't explain that, did I?
But I get the general idea.
Yeah. If only I was more articulate.
So anyway, I have to agree. It was a bit of a mess, this movie. I wanted to like it, but first of all, what are your thoughts on Jesse Eisenberg in general?
Oh, I quite like him. I mean, he's certainly very well cast here. I mean, you do have to wonder if he's a bit of a one-trick pony, but I mean, for instance, I was never convinced by the cool version of him. Like,
right.
I wasn't buying that. Do you know what I mean? But I suppose they got away with it in the context of the film, because in the context of the film, it's kind of cartoonish anyway.
Right.
It's ridiculous. The way that Wallace Shawn is always like, my God, you know, Wallace Shawn's the right guy to play that guy as well. Right? He sells it really well. Right? Everything he does is like he's shitting gold or something, right? So they get away with it to that. I don't know what my problem with it is. Again, it's like I said, it seems really outdated. Like the whole Mia Wasikowska character is such a, whatever they call it, manic pixie girl fucking trope thing that people don't really do anymore, or at least it's interrogated. And I thought there's like a scene where she's shouting at him she's not shouting at him, she's actually referring to someone else, but it's played very knowingly, tongue-in-cheek, where she's saying to him, do you think I'm going to fall in love with you just because you're watching me wistfully from afar? Like, how do you think that's going to play out? And you think, oh, okay, the film's taking that turn. It's actually interrogating this old trope about the nice guy with a telescope. And you think, oh, okay, it's going to get to grips with this. But by the end of the film, she has fallen for him. And she has gone for the nice guy rather than the cool guy. And so that's what I mean. On the one hand, it seems like it's ready to, okay, let's interrogate this. Let's move on. Let's get to another level with this. But then falls back on the old way. Yeah. Right. For example, that's just one example. I found it kind of problematic, and in some ways, I suppose you could argue it's ambitious, but it just doesn't live up to the ambition. I didn't think. Not a film without pleasures. I mean, there's some quite funny bits in it. There's the bit where he's trying to hear what nice Jesse Eisenberg is saying to Mia Wasikowska on the other side of the restaurant, and like ridiculous things keep happening, like someone turning a blender on next to you.
Yeah.
That's quite funny.
That was great. Yeah, it was very broad comedy. Yeah, so.
And there's a bit near the end where where he's struggling with some people, like the ganging up on him, and some guy's false arm comes off in his hand.
Oh.
I thought that was quite funny.
Right.
But these bits were kind of sporadic for me, and again, it started off like you. I wanted to like it, but it just kind of seemed to get bogged down, and I don't even know what it got bogged down. It's like it melted or something halfway through, like
right, yeah,
balloon ran out of air or something.
Yeah. I would say that, I don't know, how close is the movie to the book?
Well, if memory serves, it's the same basic setup, that suddenly a guy turns up who's a doppelganger, but everyone loves him more, and he can't figure out why no one notices. It's, they do that in the where he takes Noah Taylor aside. Have you noticed he looks exactly like me? And it's like, oh yeah, I suppose he does. No one really makes a big deal about it.
Yeah.
Which again is that nightmarish Kafka thing, right? Like something apparently so obvious, but no one else seems to see it apart from you.
Except for you, yeah. So, and then I think it started out strong, and then just kind of, I think it with Enemy, I was saying with Mike, always said like, oh, they didn't know how to finish this movie. I think in this case they didn't know how to finish it. Right?
I agree with you.
I think that because, as you said in the book, it gets more existential and sort of like philosophical, I think, by the end. So I think they probably doesn't have, I mean, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like maybe the story doesn't have a clear ending that they were trying to put onto the movie, but didn't really go anywhere.
It's funny, I think when you're dealing with like Kafka especially, I think the mistake people make is, so Kafka's writing is incredibly solipsistic and self-absorbed,
right?
But Kafka is a genius, and he was a genius, so he punches through that. So inevitably it reaches a more interesting place. But because his work is so solipsistic, it attracts other solipsistic people, right? And I think a lot of other people are attracted to that kind of concept of the whole world revolving around and you're the only person put upon. But very few people are capable of breaking through that solipsism and reaching something else, right? And I think that's the problem with this film, is it's attracted to a kind of worldview that Kafka has, more than Dostoevsky, I would argue, but there's some Dostoevsky in there. But then it doesn't go anywhere with it. Like, it doesn't, Richard Ayoade and Avi Karin are not Kafkas, they're not Dostoevskys. And you don't have to be. I mean, I don't necessarily expect that, but this doesn't really give me much pleasure in any other way, apart from here and there. There's some funny bits. And, it's more, I mean, it's more interesting than, I don't know, one of those Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore romantic comedies or something like that. I mean, at least it tries for something a bit different. Right. But actually, I'd rather see a well-constructed Adam Sandler, Drew Barrymore film, if you see what I mean, because at least it would be doing what it's doing right. Whereas this isn't, difficult to sum up.
Actually, I quite like Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore movies.
Okay, there you go.
I know. I would say that in general, this one, it wasn't bad, really, per se. It wasn't a bad movie. I mean, it was sort of enjoyable, but it was just sort of like when it was done. Same thing what we were talking about with Enemy, which is that if they didn't have that ending, if they wrapped up Enemy with a bow, we would have, as we said, we would have just said, meh, yeah, okay, yeah, well, good, and then you just forget about it. that kind of happened with this movie. Is they tried to wrap it up, and then I just kind of went, oh, okay, meh, and then I just promptly forgot about the movie. It was sort of like it didn't have any reaction on me at all, right? So
and to be honest, they didn't even tie it up that well.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's like a crappy bow. Like
it was an attempt to tie it up, but it didn't. It was kind of like, oh, okay, I got it, right? So, but definitely it was an attempt at something, and it wasn't terrible. It's not a bad movie, but I would say it wasn't. I wouldn't necessarily. It was a mess, but it was definitely could have been better, right? Yeah. So. And
there was a lot of stuff in there that just felt like, oh, this would be cool. Let's put that in, rather than it having like. I didn't mind them being there, but all the Japanese songs, like the soundtrack. Like Japanese enka and like Showa era kind of songs. I was thinking, what the fuck's this got to do with anything?
I think there were pop songs translated into Japanese. I think some of them were.
Yeah, but they were. Yes, but they were genuine old Japanese Showa era enka songs, because I recognized a few of them. But it was just, like, why are they there other than cool,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with what was going on. Yeah. So yeah.
Which again is fine. I don't necessarily mind that, but it just feels as if the film had a slightly self-inflated
sense of worth.
Yeah, which it didn't earn.
Right. Yeah, as I said with Enemy, I didn't mind the ending because it earned it, right? But I didn't think this one really earned the ending by the time I got there. So,
bunch of famous people in this film as well, but
right.
I can't be bothered to name them because we are kind of running out of time here as well.
I think it's a bit. I don't think there's much more to say about this movie.
Exactly. If I'd have liked it more, I might have insisted to mention all about Paddy Considine and the 18 VHS looking. But the thing is, it doesn't add up to anything, so it's not really.
No.
The only one thing I will say is, the whole thing about artists always copy from people, before they find their own voice, and dwarves standing on the shoulders of giants and all that. I would say I'm not with Richard Ayoade, like I said before. I like some of the stuff he does. I don't like some of the other stuff. I feel as if he may be a talent in embryonic form. Like, I can imagine one day Richard Ayoade might deliver a really, really, really good film. So I am kind of interested to see what he does next.
I see.
I mean, it's not necessarily the case. I wouldn't bet money on it, but I'm not fiercely, I'm not
opposed to it.
I get the feeling he's a guy trying to do interesting things. So he may come up with a really great film next time. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Well, good luck to him.
Yes. Go, Richard. Right. Okay. There we go then. A couple of doubles.
Anything else to add?
Not really. No, there's nothing witty coming to me at all. How about you?
Nothing witty coming to me at all. It's double. Say double. No, I don't know.
Yeah, right. See.
We really need to work on our endings too, I think. Right, so.
Yeah, that's true. We can ditch it out, but we need to take our own advice.
Yeah.
How about I hit myself on the head and the same wound appears on yours?
Oh, on mine. Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
And that'll work. Yeah. Or we sing in Japanese.
Here we go.
Okay. We'll see you next time, listeners. Thank you.
Ow!
Ow! You sound like a crow. Well, thanks for joining us at the Magic Morning Wood, listeners. We'll just do a normal wrap up. Thanks for joining us for another episode, and welcome to 2021. And hope we'll see you next time.
Yes,
thank you.
Another year of cinematic goodness in the wood awaits.
All right.
Right.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.
Down to the disco last Saturday night, looking for action, feeling all right. One lady dancing was such a delight. As I sauntered up to meet her, she said,
"Boys don't fight on the disco floor. Just a disco floor. And if you like the way I shake it, and you think you wanna make it, there's 50 just like me. Oh, oh, on the disco floor. Just a disco floor. And if you like the way I shake it, and you think you want to make it, there's 50 just like me. Oh, oh. Now nobody has to spend the night alone.
The disco doors opened. A lady walked in. I didn't believe it. They could have been twins. They winked at each other and started to twirl. And the dancing they were doing made my eyeballs whirl. I could have watched for an hour or more, but a dozen just like them moved onto the floor. The lasers were flashing in time with the sound. They said,
"Come on, boys, get dancing. There's enough to go around." On the disco floor, disco floor, on the disco floor, disco floor, just disco floor, disco floor, disco floor, disco floor. And if you like the way I shake it, and you think you wanna make it, there's 50 just like me. Oh, 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 oh. On the disco floor, on the disco floor, on the disco floor, on the disco floor, just disco floor, disco floor, disco floor, disco floor. And if you like the way I shake it, and you think you wanna make it, there's 50 just like me. Oh, oh, ooh, darling. Now nobody has to spend the night alone.
I like the way you...
Do you?
I think I'd like to...
Would you?
I think that I could...
Would you?